What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Look Ahead, part of the SB Nation NFL show. I am Rob Stats Guerrera from Niners Nation. With me, as always, on a Friday, wearing his Astros jersey with pride from Blogging the Boys, Mr. RJ Ochoa. What's up, RJ?
7-2 against the supposed best teams in baseball over the last week and a half. Should be 9-0, arguably the Houston Astros. It's great to be with you, Stats. Great time to be alive. It's 4th of July weekend. Some would argue the most seminal baseball weekend in America. This is the weekend that the kids from the Sandlot went and played under the bright lights of the fireworks. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Before we leave, want to know what your most go-to 4th of July movie is. You can answer that now, in the middle of the show, at the end of the show. It's up to you.
Jeez, other than the Sandlot, I can't even really think of a specific 4th of July movie.
Independence
But it would be
Day.
It'd be tough to top the Sandlot. The Sandlot it's an all-timer. It's one of those.
Do you think anybody calls it the Sandlot? Is it an Ohio State situation, or is it just Sandlot? People say Sandlot. Yeah.
Isn't the name of the movie The Sandlot?
I mean, yeah, but is the name of the movie The Jurassic Park, or is it just Jurassic Park? I really don't know.
It's just Jurassic Park.
Okay, whatever. Anyway, Stats, we always want to encourage people to subscribe to the SB Nation NFL show, leave a rating, write a review. Also watch us on all of our SB Nation NFL channels. If you write a review, we will read it. That is a promise. That is the Rob Stats guarantee. Do you agree, Stats?
I do, and we will.
We have 2 reviews to read if you're ready for this. Can I see your ready face? Okay, podcast audience didn't need to see that. Anyway, the first one comes to us from Sad 12th. I don't know if it's obvious, but there's a Seahawks flavor to this. It is titled, I love the show, but ... ellipse cliffhanger. 5-star review, by the way. SB Nation content is great. I love NFL University, but all the shows are excellent. The critique of the NFL is spot on all fronts. Please bring back the off day debrief. Well, yeah, not everybody's perfect. Stats. As a lifelong Seahawks fan, see, I told you the Sad 12 thing, you and I should be mortal enemies. That said, your takes are too good. I'm as eyes open on my team as you are on yours. Hats off to you. RJ, I bit my tongue at the gazpacho thing. I know continually making new content is hard, but the Riku, come on, dude, calm down. You're better than this. I believe in you. So, you know what? Words are difficult. You're right. When you're talking all day long in different capacities, sometimes you make a mistake that you wish you could have back. I'm not saying that's one of them, but it is what it is. Thank you to Sad 12 Stats. The second review that we're reading today comes to us from Jake in Memphis. A hat trick of reviews from Jake. It is titled Filling the Void Reply Finale 5-star review. Here we go. Thanks, RJ, for reading my review again. I hope it incentivizes others to participate as well. I look forward to listening to other SB Nation and NFC East mixtape episodes. Finally, I've played fantasy baseball for almost 20 years. My advice would be the following. Look at expert mock drafts for guidance, when to draft someone. Not any site's ranked player list. Make sure the player isn't ranked high because of last year's career year or ranked too low because of an outlier bad year or injury. Pitchers get hurt all the time, so don't invest too many early picks in pitchers. And some players are streaky. Don't give up or fall in love too soon. Good luck and enjoy. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Best wishes, Jake. Stats, you are very notably the reigning champion of your fantasy baseball league. Do you agree with the points of advice from Jake in Memphis?
I do. Sadly, I have to report that I am not the reigning champ.
You were, though.
Yes.
So if you have a recent title, is my point.
I lost by half a point because ESPN refuses to let you get both pitching and batting stats for Shohei Ohtani when he's on your team. Yeah, it's absurd.
No, that's a joke, right?
I'm not making it up. You can, when he plays and he pitches, you could either start him as a hitter or a pitcher, but you can't start him as both, even though you have the player. It's ridiculous.
That is the dumbest thing, because that is literally the lure and appeal and mystique to who he is as a player. That is so stupid. Oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, so that's not ideal, but I agree with all the other advice that was in that review. So thank you, everybody who dropped those. Please continue to keep them coming. I also want to remind you that we are brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today. Use code SBNNFL, no matter what bet you want to make. Basketball, NBA free agency, whatever it is, use code SBNNFL. You'll get a special offer when you sign up only at DraftKings. All right, RJ, I'm kind of excited about today's show because you threw out this idea and I really like it. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to answer big NFL questions with NFL questions. And it reminded me of the show Parks and Rec, when one of the characters, Ron Swanson, has to appear in a government hearing, and he decides he's going to be a hostile witness, and he's going to answer every question with a question. And that's what we're going to attempt to do on today's show. I love the idea, so credit to you.
If it's credit to me, do I get to start? Do I get to start the first question? Like press the first domino that's going to go down and just see them all cascade?
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay, so it can be anything I want, right? Any question, and then you're tasked. I mean, we're going to discuss it and flesh it out, and then you're going to ultimately say, okay, here's my reply, and that's your question. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, my question. Why do the Indianapolis Colts deserve the benefit of the doubt? Why? What have the Colts done to earn the benefit of the doubt? Why does everybody implicitly trust the Colts? Why does everybody implicitly trust Frank Reich, the Indianapolis Colts head coach? Why does everybody implicitly trust Chris Ballard? What is the deal here? I know I've been, the only one who has the stones to hold the Colts accountable, but where does this come from? Spoiler alert, we have already recorded next week's Monday Football Monday. It is a very, very special episode. And I mentioned a lot of things there. The Colts kind of came up. But so if you're a Colts fan, then maybe you won't enjoy it. But I mean, why do people we talked about the Chargers on that episode where I was going, people have given the Chargers a lot of credit, but it's because Justin Herbert's done some amazing things, right? You can certainly understand it. What have the Colts done, Stats, to earn this favor from everyone?
I think that people are still giving them a break because Andrew Luck retired unexpectedly, which I agree with you. I think that time has passed. You get a honeymoon period for a year, maybe two. We're past that now. That can't continue to be your excuse. And honestly, I think it's because people like Chris Ballard, he gives good quote, he gives good press conference, the rivalry's back on, and they like Frank Reich. They do. He had success in Philadelphia. He got a lot of credit for the Carson Wentz success when he was there.
His greatest accomplishment as the Colts head coach is being the offensive coordinator of the 2017 Eagles. That's literally seriously, is that not brought up all the time? The fact that they brought in Nick, they're still, living off that. They're still today, back to the theme of baseball. Today is Bobby Bonilla Day. They are still cashing in on Frank Reich and the success that he had with the Eagles from their own reputation standpoint. And Chris Ballard, cool, dude. You drafted Quentin Nelson. You drafted Darius Leonard. A round of applause for you. Every team can find some studs, especially at the top of the draft where you found Quentin Nelson. But all they have done is collapse and choke, and they don't get that same label that other teams do.
They've made the playoffs in 2 of Frank Reich's 4 years. So I think that's bought him a little bit of leeway also. But I agree,
okay.
At some
point... They
had
a very questionable decision against the Bills last time they made it, which everybody roasted them for.
At some point, you have to find your quarterback. You can't keep going Andrew Luck, Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan. You got to find your guy. And I'll ask this question because I think it's going to take us to other interesting places. How often does importing the veteran quarterback work out? Now, I know that's exactly what the Rams just did with Matthew Stafford, and they won the Super Bowl. But if you look
at the Bucks and Tom Brady, to be fair.
Yes, that's true. But overall, if you look at the number of times a quarterback changes teams, it usually doesn't work out. And yet that's the route that the Colts keep going here. And they've made the playoffs a couple of times, but I agree with you. More often than that, it's kind of been
I mean, they deserve their own. I know it's a thing of the past, but the Cleveland Browns jersey that was in the store window, you know what I mean? At this point, you kind of need one. But so that's your official question, just to be clear. You're okay. Well, Stats, I don't know if you've heard this before or not, but Drew Brees might be the greatest free agent acquisition in NFL history. All right, that's one example. You could certainly say Peyton Manning is another example, right? But you're talking about some, all-time situations here. Peyton Manning's an all-time quarterback in Denver. Drew Brees is an all-time quarterback in New Orleans. Tom Brady's an all-time quarterback in Tampa Bay. The Rams had this coalescence of all-time factors sort of work on their behalf with Matthew Stafford, including Jaquiski Tartt dropping an interception that would have sent the San Francisco 49ers to the Super Bowl. Didn't mean to rub salt in the wound, Stats, just making my point. But other than that, I think we can come up with a lot of examples of veteran quarterbacks not working out. Donovan McNabb in Washington and Minnesota. I can tell you Vinny Testaverde, Drew Bledsoe in Dallas. who like I'm all of a sudden I guess Kurt Warner worked out for the Rams, right? Like technically, if you want to be fair, but he didn't work out for the Giants, right? I mean,
terrible for the Giants. Ryan Fitzpatrick on any team he's ever been on, which I think at this point is like
that's a little
9
different.
teams. The Steelers, before Ben Roethlisberger got there, they were importing everybody. Like, we don't remember a lot of these because it's just like, it just kind of goes by the wayside. But more often than not, it doesn't work out.
Would you classify Carson Palmer's 2 stops as an import as working out? I don't think either of us would say his time in Oakland worked out, right? Like that's a clear.
Well, he retired to get out of there.
Well, it's difficult to say it's a failure. Like that's such an aggressive word, but like if it's a pass-fail proposition, like whether it worked out or not, it failed. And like I don't think it worked in Arizona. I know they put him in their ring of honor because they're losers and don't have anybody that they've ever drafted that they can put in that thing, but except for Larry Fitzgerald. But I mean, like was like, do we look back on the Carson Palmer era in Arizona and feel like you know what I remember most honestly about the Carson Palmer era in Arizona? I remember Peter King did a massive 3,000 word article about the like virtual reality thing that they were super media friendly. They were the first all or nothing team, and so people, and like big shocker, that's where all the Bruce Arians love comes from. But like that team was fine, and that team was really defensive driven. I mean, like that was like peak. I wouldn't say peak, but like early peak Honey Badger. Patrick Peterson still operating at a high level. Calais Campbell. I mean, so that's another example of it not working out. The Browns have had 1 billion imports not work out. I mean, the Bills even before, like, you know, Tyrod Taylor is an example in Houston and the Chargers that didn't work out, although with the Chargers he certainly led to the birth of Justin Herbert. But yeah, it's tough business. I mean, Kirk Cousins, is that working out for the Vikings? I mean, that's an import.
I think they would say no. I mean, they keep signing him to new deals, but I would say no, right? Like when you pay a quarterback, what was it, $84 or $82 million fully guaranteed? Like you're saying you're taking us to the promised land, and not only have they not gotten there, they've kind of flamed out.
Yeah, I mean, the fail story, like Sam Darnold is an import of a quarterback, right? Like he's not working out right now. I mean, that is so amazing that happened, by the way. I mean, just truly astounding. Jameis Winston, he's an import. Is that working? No. I mean,
no, like that's what I mean. Like, so again, the successes there are some for sure. But I just think way more often than not, it doesn't work out. And I think there's a difference between like, you know, Jameis Winston or Matt Ryan now going to the Colts and Tom Brady, who is the greatest quarterback in the history of football. Like, obviously, yeah, if that guy's available, you should bring him in. But that guy usually doesn't hit the open market.
Interesting. Okay, so again, the whole point is like the questions have to like somewhat answer the previous question and serve as a springboard to the next question, like yours did. So my question is, what import has the highest success rate possible? What notable import? Like what generally speaking can you bring into your team that they will like have a high level of success in the immediate future? Go. I have the answer, but you can give your wrong one if you want.
Are you saying specifically this year or just like in general?
In general, that is obviously hopefully applicable to this year for somebody.
Oh man. Off the top of my head, you want like a specific person or just a position?
Anything. It's a question. It's open-ended question. We're just here. We're two pals hanging out, talking ball.
I would say wide receiver. I think if you can bring in a veteran wide receiver, that can have a solid impact on your team, and that can work out a lot.
Name the instances that happened.
Emmanuel Sanders with the 49ers in 2019. Odell Beckham Jr. with the Rams last year. I mean, he was a huge part of their success, but obviously he got hurt in the Super Bowl, but he was tearing it up, and he came in just as Robert Woods got hurt. I think that's a factor.
Anquan Bolden to the Niners.
Cowboys. Anquan Bolden to the Ravens. Anquan Bolden to the Niners.
Yeah.
Should I continue?
Okay. I was looking at it as more of like a final piece sort of thing, but your answer does suffice. My answer is the defensive mercenary, who's like, you know, an all-world defensive talent that is maybe not ring chasing, but clearly like regarded as the final piece, the person who's going to put us over the edge. Charles Haley is a very historic example of that. Darrelle Revis kind of became that, obviously, as of late. There are different examples. Those are, you know, massive headliner ones, but Deion Sanders is obviously maybe the best example, but this year is one that was last year. Von Miller, That's who Von Miller is right now, right? Is he not in that category of player? Like, I know that might sound absurd to some people. I'm not saying he's Dion or Charles Haley, but Von Miller's got an incredible case to be in the Hall of Fame when his career's all said and done. He's still playing at a high level, played obviously at that level for the Rams, winning the Super Bowl. I mean, Von Miller is that defensive mercenary. If he can be kept on a sort of pitch count that keeps him comfortable with his health and his wellness, I mean, I'm so torn on how much I truly believe in the Bills just based on everything that's gotten us to this point, but I love that move. I love when that team in that spot that is that close makes that specific move. Go get the defensive mercenary.
First of all, Von Miller is walking into the Hall of Fame. If he never plays another snap,
okay, that's fine. Okay.
He's in it.
Okay.
You're talking about a 3-time All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler, 2 Super Bowl championships, a Super Bowl MVP, which is, I feel like, incredibly rare for a defensive player. He's
wow,
booking.
The Malcolm Smith disrespect. Wow.
Plus, everybody loves Von. He's in like that. That's happening. But yeah, we've seen pass rushers, especially. I feel like hop around a little bit. I mean. Chris Long was kind of like that, like not to that level. Like you're right, Reggie White, but Chris Long was kind of that guy at the tail end, going to the Patriots and then the Eagles right away. Yeah, I don't think he was seen as like the superstar guy though. Like Von Miller is like elite player, but no, that it translates, man. Because like you don't really have to like. What is it that you have to learn that's new going from one team as a pass rusher? You're like, all right, just get the friggin' quarterback. Like I can do that.
Well, or if you're an elite corner, Richard Sherman. I mean, it only happened once, but like going to San Francisco, like that's a big deal. That happens. And now Honey Badger went to Kansas City, right? Like he had his ones. I think people forget that he stopped in Houston along the way, but he went from Houston to Kansas City, parlayed that into his own world championship. I mean, it's defensive mercenaries are the thing now.
I don't even know if it's fair to call him a mercenary. Like what? Why? Because he wants money for playing? Like what?
I would say
fair?
I mean, no, I would say mercenary from the perspective of like they generally join contending teams. Like Von Miller isn't going to Buffalo just for the money. Like the money's a big deal, obviously.
Right.
But like it's partly because like they're like a team that's on the cusp and that he can help push over the edge. Like Honey Badger in Kansas City, like the other teams we've listed here. So it's like Darrelle Revis again didn't not go to New England because of the money, but it lined up like money and interest, and it all obviously worked out for him.
Right, but I just feel like it's weird. What if Von decided to go to the Jags because they paid the most money? Then he's just all about the money, right? But if he wants to go to a contending team, now we're going to rip him for that and call him a mercenary? It just seems weird.
To be fair, I'm not ripping him for that. I think it's cool. Like, I'm applauding the team more than the player. Like, I think I love the move for the team to go out and get the defensive mercenary who's available because they're so close. I mentioned this on the Monday Football Monday that we already recorded, but I think it's so dumb that the Bills are like, oh my gosh, the coin toss, that we were so robbed. You had 3 seconds, whatever it was. I already forgot at this point.
13 seconds.
I mean, like, it's so stupid. You had your opportunity. And if Von Miller helps you close that gap, then yeah, you went and got your mercenary. You needed one job done. You went out and got the guy who can do it.
So my question would be, are the Bills the only Super Bowl or bust team where you would be like legitimately disappointed if they don't at least make the Super Bowl?
That's interesting. So if we look at last year's division winners, I think you can make an argument that like if they don't appear in the Super Bowl this year, that you still totally feel fine about their future. The Bengals, obviously, you feel great about their long-term future. The Titans, meh. The Chiefs, obviously. the Rams, you always trust. The Bucks are unique, and I don't know that you can put them in that box just because they're not on borrowed time, but they're just on like this specific window of time with Tom Brady.
But they've already won one.
That's true too.
You can't really be that disappointed.
The Cowboys are, whatever. I would say the only other team is probably the Packers. And I know that Aaron Rodgers signed the contract, so like you've gotten rid of like that bugaboo, but like the regression is coming at some point. And look, he has tortured my sports life. All right. Like, so please, regression, come. Like, I'm waiting for you any moment now. But I mean, he's got back-to-back MVPs. They've won 1 billion games over the first couple of years here with Matt LaFleur. Like, at some point, that has to change. Like that, the bottom will come out. I know it hasn't happened to this organization for 3 decades now because of their star quarterbacks, but I do think that they obviously feel this like need and urge to get another, right? Like you cannot let his whole career go by and have only won one Super Bowl. You just can't, especially with all the talent that's coming in. Like the time is not now. The time has been for the Packers, and so they're probably the closest team. But you're right, the Bills are the team that's I think most visibly gone all in. The Packers traded away Devontae Adams, so they're like not in that same category of like contribution. But I think that's the answer that comes closest.
I think you're right, because it's not like the Packers sneak into the playoffs every year and then, oh, it doesn't work out. Like they steamroll through the regular season and then they get to the playoffs and they disappoint. I know everybody, remembers the 15-1 team that lost to the Giants at Lambeau Field when it was so cold. I thought Tom Coughlin's face was going to shatter into 1,000 pieces. But like, Aaron Rodgers is kind of known for playoff disappointments, unfortunately. He's a great player, Hall of Fame player, arguably the greatest quarterback in Green Bay Packers history. But in the playoffs, he has fallen short, and I definitely think that there is that urgency. I remember last year after the 49ers beat them in the playoffs, and I just remember thinking, like, if you're Aaron Rodgers, like, what do you got to do to win in the playoffs? You lost because of a blocked punt that got returned for a touchdown. Like, it was just unbelievable circumstances. But that's the only thing that matters for Aaron Rodgers. It doesn't matter what he could throw for 70 touchdowns in the regular season. If he doesn't win a Super Bowl, it doesn't matter. So I agree. I think it's Buffalo and Green Bay. That's a good call by you.
Thank you very much. I would say one other thing that Aaron Rodgers is known for is giving his teammates nicknames that end in Y. Like that's the person that Aaron Rodgers is, like Cobby. You know what I mean? Like like he's always got to add, like if you were friends with him, he'd be like Statsy. You know what I mean? Like that's his like go-to nickname for people. It's just like add a Y. Where, like it doesn't make sense with my name, but it does for like a Y. Like he would call Pete Petey. You know what I mean? He would be like Kiss, like Kisty. Like that's his thing. Like we've seen it 1,000 times.
That's a very baseball thing. They love to do that in baseball. And the worst example of that I ever heard was, I want to say, Matt Shields, the pitcher, and they called him Shieldsy. Awful.
Okay. Well, you've actually just inspired my question. This is a little bit of a larger leap, but like Super Bowl or bust. What team in the NFL has the largest chance to win a title and share it with somebody in their city, right? Like, so the Bills don't have like a baseball. I don't know. I'm sure Bills fans or Yankees or Mets fans. I don't know. But I don't know because the Astros destroyed both of them. So like, I don't know that there's anything left. But I mean, the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup, right? It's a TBD situation on who wins the World Series. The Golden State Warriors won the NBA Finals. So like, what we're talking, the Niners are eligible because of the Warriors. We're talking the Broncos are eligible because of the Avalanche. And then you've got to play the game with baseball stats. Who you think is likely going to win the World Series? So I guess the question is truly, what city has the chance to have the largest level of joy, happiness, gratitude, sports, euphoria, and nirvana?
I think that a lot of people in Denver would say it's clearly the Broncos, but I don't think it is. I don't think the acquisition of Russell Wilson even guarantees that they make the playoffs. The AFC is loaded. The other teams in the AFC West are loaded. So I don't know that it's necessarily Denver with Russell Wilson.
So the other eligible answers, if we just like think this out, like flesh it out, the Niners would have to be the answer or a answer because of the Warriors. Like you're pigeonholed with the NBA Finals and the NHL Finals, obviously, because those seasons are over. And then from a baseball standpoint, you've got the two New York teams. So I think you can lump the Bills in there, right? Like, because again, there's probably a lot of Bills who root for either or. They're the only team who plays in New York, so like they're definitely there. And then if you think the Astros are going to win the World Series, then it's not the Texans. Then your answer is probably the Niners or the Broncos. So this comes down to this last part of it is kind of a two-part answer. Who you think is going to win the World Series, and then like jumping off of that, who is the NFL team that most likely has a chance to share a title?
I feel like I got to go with the Yankees and the Bills.
Wow.
I really do. I think it might have to be the state of New York.
Wow.
The Yankees are
They just lost to the Astros without Jordan, but no big deal. Whatever, it's all good.
I don't want to pick the 49ers because you're just going to accuse me of being a homer, so I'm not going to do it.
There's a fantastic segment of Monday Football Monday with that flavor. I just am so excited about that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ultimately be proven right. But no, look, the Bills, we talked about it. They're Super Bowl or bust. I think they have the best quarterback in the league, honestly. And they're loaded. They're ready. There's absolutely no reason why they can't win a Super Bowl. And the Yankees appear like they're going to be at least in the World Series or at least in the American League Championship Series. So if I got to push my money to any one of those, I'm going New York.
I know I've kind of amended the question as we moved along, but I think if you had to cover a state or like just a general geographic area, it's probably New York, to your point. Like, and that's maybe not Bills Yankees fans, maybe the Bills Mets fans, but you're talking about the teams with the best records in their respective leagues. So like that's just, if you throw the net over the whole state, it's going to work out. There might be some Bills fans that it doesn't work out for that are Yankees or Mets fans, but I think one of them is likely going to be in the World Series. I think the Mets are more likely to be in the World Series because the Astros exist in the American League, but that's just me. But I thought that was a fun question, so shout out to me.
I didn't mention the Mets. I do like the Mets. Like
they have the best record in the National League. Like how? Like that's what I'm saying. Like that. You know, I think it's. I don't know. You're from that area, so this is not my question because you're actually up. But you tell me. I've always associated Jets and Mets fans as the same camp. Like I feel like most people like that's your chosen path in life, or you're either Jets, Mets, or Giants, Yankees. Is that accurate based on your life and your experience?
It doesn't obviously describe everybody, but yeah,
right.
I would say that that's accurate.
Yeah, you've got some like Giants, Mets, and Jets, Yankees, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, right. But where do Bills fans fall? Like again, you're from the East Coast, that whole neck of the woods.
There were no Bills fans. I don't know. Like, look, the Bills were great in the '90s, and then like they disappeared. You know, like I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the situation is with Bills fans.
Okay,
boy, well, I feel like you.
Good luck answering asking a better question than I.
Right, like you've steered us into a corner here. Like I don't even know where to go with my question. How to answer that with an actual question? Yeah,
you can do this. You can do this. Stats.
You stumped me, man. I mean, now you got baseball going through my head.
Colorado Avalanche just had their parade. I mean, you know,
what playoff drought is more likely to end? Ooh. The longest playoff drought in the NFL, which would be the New York Jets, 11 years without a playoff spot, or the longest playoff drought in Major League Baseball, which just so happens to be the longest playoff drought in North American professional sports, my Seattle Mariners, who have not made the playoffs since 2001. Last time the Mariners made the playoffs, I was 16 years old. I'm now 37, married with 2 kids, and they still haven't made the playoffs.
So I will say this. I think it's cool. Like, shout out to North American sports that our longest playoff drought is still this century. You know what I mean? like nobody's last one is in the 1900s anymore. Like, we're all here this century. So looking at the Mariners in the wild card race, yikes. Yeah, it's tough cookies, dude. I mean, you know, they're only, how many games back here, the Guardians? 2 games back, 2.5 games back at this point, whatever, 3 games back. I mean, they've got some positive vibes going. Last week was a big positive week for the Mariners and you know, everything in the brawl and whatnot. I mean, I feel like most people were on the Mariners side in that. Like the national consensus was the Mariners were right. And I know Winkler, like there was the pizza thing and everything. I think the Mariners. I mean, because like again, they're close. They're in this mix. Like you can see that happen. There's a long way to go, and like they've played some solid baseball lately. And I don't necessarily believe in the Guardians or the Blue Jays. So that's I just don't see a path for the Jets, right? Like if we name you know the 4 division winners, I mean like who are, so if we assume, I think we would, general consensus here, stats agree that the 4 division winners in the AFC, let's just say, are the Bills, the Bengals, the Chiefs, and we'll just give the Titans the respect. Let's say everyone repeats. I know that's not likely, but let's just do it. Then the 3 wild card teams are 2 AFC West teams and the Patriots, 2 AFC West teams and the Steelers, 2 AFC West teams and the Colts. You know, like the Jets aren't making that group.
Yeah, and a lot of people seem to be like giving the Jets a lot of love, like a lot of positive vibes. I don't love their roster, even though it's better than it was. It was hideously bad. I don't love their roster. I don't love their quarterback at all. At all. Like he seems to be escaping criticism. I'm stunned by this. He was
I saw you going off about this on Twitter
last year. Like, and people are like, oh, when he came back from injury, he was better. Well, he didn't throw nearly as many interceptions, but he was still ass. I got to see it. Maybe he could be better, but I got to see it at all. But that said, I'm not ever picking the Mariners to end their playoff drought. I have said this many times, and it's a lesson I learned from them. There is no bottom to losing. You can lose forever. It's not like, well, eventually they'll have to be good. No, they won't. No, they won't. There is no bottom to losing.
Look, Stat, I just on my quadcast behind you, I hadn't realized the Guardians play the Yankees tonight. So that's another loss for the Guardians. The gap is going to shrink tonight, Stats. It's possible. I mean, it's very, very. I really do think that's likely. I think that's more probable, more statistically possible. It's just, but yeah, I agree with you. I think of all the rookie quarterbacks who had serious playing time last year, I guess that doesn't include Trey Lance. I'm really not taking a shot here. I probably trust Zach Wilson the least, and that includes Davis Mills. And even if Trey Lance is not talented, and I don't even know if he is, none of us know. I mean, I know you believe, but none of us know because we haven't seen anything. Even if he's not talented at all, I trust him more with Kyle Shanahan than I've been out on this for a long time. I don't trust Robert Saleh in the Jets. Like, I don't trust it. Like, what part of that operation do you trust? I guess that's my question. That's my springboarding question. What part of the Jets operation is worthy of trust? Like, my very first question was like, how have the Colts earned the benefit of the doubt? I don't think anybody's giving it to the Jets, but what would you give it to them for?
I trust Joe Douglas to make smart trades for acquiring draft picks because he has done that. He's made smart deals for a lot of picks. You got to give him credit for that. To get multiple first-round picks for Jamal freaking Adams, a safety that can't even do his actual job, like, that's impressive. So I give Joe Douglas credit for that. But you're right. After that, I don't trust any aspect of their organization. I don't trust their offense. I don't trust their defense. I don't even trust the dude designing the uniforms.
Oh, I agree. So, true or false? They have the worst head coach in the division.
Yeah, I don't know about Mike McDaniel. I
think the average football fan takes Mike McDaniel over Robert Saleh.
I think people like Mike McDaniel because he's funny, but we have no idea. But I'm going to say no.
He represents a lot more hope, and he's an offensive minded coach. Robert Saleh's not. And in today's NFL,
he's never called a play before.
Who cares?
Mike McDaniel. He's going to be the guy calling the plays.
Have you seen the shoes he wears, Stats? He's so cool. I mean, you can anyway. Is it fair to say that the Jets have the worst quarterback in the division?
Oh, yeah.
So they arguably, because you didn't totally agree, have the worst head coach and the worst quarterback. I mean,
yeah, without question.
That's tough. That's tough business. Okay, that was my springboard question. That was kind of short. What's your springboard?
Yeah, that was pretty short. All right, my springboard question is, which new head coach do you trust? Specifically, we have seen historically, at least one of these new head coaches is going to make the playoffs this year. If you go back multiple years, I think it's at least 5 straight years, a new head coach has made the playoffs. So if you had to pick a new head coach this year, RJ, who would you pick and why?
To make the playoffs, or do I trust? Because you've asked two different questions.
To make the playoffs. You trust to make the playoffs. How about that?
So, okay, just to be clear, to make sure, new head coaches, Brian Dable, Kevin O'Connell, Matt Eberflus, Dennis Allen, I guess, technically.
Yep.
And those are all the NFC new head coaches, I believe. Then we've got Mike McDaniel.
Oh, did you forget Tampa Bay?
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, Bruce Arians is he commands so much attention. It's so difficult to overlook. Todd Bowles. We've got Mike McDaniel. We've got Lovie Smith and Doug Peterson and Josh McDaniels. Okay. So I think most likely to make the playoffs, I think people would say Josh McDaniels is maybe the most likely to make the playoffs. A lot of that's the talent of the roster and things like that. I don't know that I trust Josh McDaniels. Like, I feel like we can. I'm not saying like everybody's a victim of their past, but like we've conveniently forgotten, or like some people conveniently dismiss what happened last time he was a head coach. And like, I think a lot of people, not just players, but I think a lot of people get victimized by where they're at. And people say like, well, what does he do? Like, his job's not hard. Like, for example, Eric Bieniemy, it's, well, how hard is his job? Andy Reid's the head coach and Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback, whatever, blah, blah. Well, Josh McDaniel had Tom Brady at quarterback and Bill Belichick as his head coach. Like, and I know we've had this discussion a billion different times about the Patriots and their organization and hierarchy and the way things work. But so I don't know. Like, that could work out very well. I think he's probably the most likely to make the playoffs. I almost went Kevin O'Connell. Because I think in the NFC, like, who are your 3 wildcard teams right now? Like, if we assume, again, like we did in the AFC, if we assume Dallas, Green Bay, Tampa, and the Rams all win the division, who are your 3 wildcard teams? Like, one of them is absolutely the Vikings, right? I know you're going Niners and maybe Eagles, and then Vikings.
I think the Eagles are going to win the division, but whatever. We'll put them in for this discussion. The Niners, I'm putting in for this discussion. And then...
So then it comes down to, do you think the Vikings beat out the Saints or Cardinals?
No, I don't. F the Saints, man. No.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, the Vikings are, like, the path to them being a playoff team is much more friendly, I think, than it is for Josh McDaniel in the AFC, obviously.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the NFC... Like, it wouldn't surprise me if you like picked an NFC team out of a hat and said they're going to make the playoffs. I wouldn't be like totally stunned, just because I think in general the conference is kind of top heavy.
I'm thinking about this a little bit more. I'm going to say that Josh McDaniels and Todd Bowles and Doug Peterson do not count for the purposes of this exercise because they've been head coaches before, right? So like, you know, like I like the whole point of this is like newness and whatever. So with that particular detail in mind, I will say Kevin O'Connell. I think Mike McDaniel could be, because we've seen the Dolphins have success. Like, he's probably second on my list. Like, I could see them sneaking into, like, you know, like if they were in the NFC, I would totally like answer them. Like, maybe 9-10 wins is enough. I think the Vikings can do it. We forget, dude, they get 4 games against the Bears and the Lions. Like, that is a huge boost to them. They get to play the Saints. I mean, I trust them to stumble their way to 10 wins or so. So I'll say Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, like Mike McDaniel's got a tough path. He's got to play Bill Belichick twice a year. He's got to play the Bills twice a year. That's 4 games that are going to be really hard. You're obviously going to be the underdog in both of those games. Like, that's tough sledding. Like, Bill Belichick's going to expose you, and he's going to do it pretty quickly. And especially, we've seen Belichick have success against the Shanahan scheme. He basically provided the blueprint for how to slow down Sean McVay. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think O'Connell has the best path.
Okay, so my next question is complicated, but this whole episode's been complicated, so I'm totally fine with that. Which head coach in the NFL, can be new or otherwise, has the most disproportionate ratio of trust to what is fair? So that can go either way, right? Like, that can be like, people trust this coach and they shouldn't, or this coach really doesn't get a lot of trust and they deserve it. What is the most disproportionate ratio in the NFL? What a great question by me. I have the answer, but, you know, it's your turn to go.
You go first. Give me some time.
It's your turn to go first. It's my question. You can stammer.
I would say, well, we've kind of already talked about it. I would say Frank Reich. He gets way more trust than I think he deserves.
So you're going that direction. You're saying he's like way in over his skis, like on relative trust that's earned.
Yeah, because are you going to go McCarthy the other way around?
I think so. I mean, like, I know you think he's an oaf and all this stuff like that, but like, he probably, like, and I know your response is going to be like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But like, for somebody, like, name a Super Bowl winning head coach who's gotten less credibility than Mike McCarthy in recent memory. Name anyone, any coach who's won a Super Bowl. Maybe Gary Kubiak, but like, name. Switzer. Okay, that's a good answer too. But like, generally speaking, if a coach has won a Super Bowl, like, it is regarded as like this magic dust that they can sprinkle and that nets them at the very least some like national levels of trust. That has never happened with Mike McCarthy.
I think he's burned through it already. I think he got it, but then when you start failing with it, when you go 7-9 with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, and then the next year you go 4-7-1, you burn through that. And I think that's what happened with McCarthy, especially when you add on to that all the other stuff that we heard about him, about his habits, about maybe him getting massages and while the game plan was being installed, and basically not putting in the real effort. I think he has just, all that credit has gone up in smoke. So I don't think Mike McCarthy is a victim by any means. I think he's getting everything that he deserves.
I think Ron Rivera is in the Frank Reich territory. Like, and again, that's where people like placate. They'd be like, well, he made a Super Bowl. Like, he gets more credit for appearing in a Super Bowl than Mike McCarthy gets for winning one. You know what I mean? Like, so, and they lost to Gary Kubiak. So, I mean, that's, you know, that says something to me. But Ron Rivera, I think, is in the territory of getting too much relative to production, especially for his time in Washington.
He's up there.
I have one more that I think gets a little bit too much credit, if you will allow me.
I will.
Kevin Stefanski. I think people are like, and now, like, and I we cannot speak to the inner workings of the Browns and like who made what decision and whatever, but like people do try to do that and say like, well, I feel so badly for Kevin Stefanski. He's been saddled with this DeShaun Watson situation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's examine Kevin Stefanski from just a football standpoint here, right? First season in Cleveland, 11-5, they make the playoffs. They have the amazing playoff win. I've said this about Washington as an example. Their last 2 division titles, the Washington football team, have come in seasons 2015 and 2020, where the Dallas Cowboys franchise quarterback suffered a season-ending injury. So, like, that's part troll, but it's part true, right? Like, if Tony Romo had been completely healthy in 2015, and if Dak Prescott had been completely healthy in 2020, like, do you think either of those Washington teams wins the division that they barely won? Probably not, right?
Probably not, but at the same time, like, injuries happen to everybody.
Sure. But, like, you get my point. So, like, to that point, in 2020, when the Browns had this, like, miraculous season that they're heralded for, like, the Steelers were, for whatever reason, still believing that Ben Roethlisberger could get it done. Joe Burrow got hurt. Lamar Jackson dealt with everything and all the injuries and whatnot coming off of it. Like, I think they were the benefits of circumstance in 2020. And they won 11 games. Like, credit to them. They won a playoff game. But they also won a playoff game against, like, a shell of a quarterback and Ben Roethlisberger. the things lined up very well for them. And I know you can only play who's on your schedule, et cetera, but the Browns really folded last year. And like, not only did the Browns really fold, like, we talk so much about, rightly so, how Mike Tomlin deserves all this credit for, like, the culture he establishes and never letting anything ruin or wreck that, like Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell, whatever. Kevin Stefanski allowed, under his watch, the culture of Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. and all the toxicity brewing there to fester and seep into their locker room and their football team. And all of that even just predates the DeShaun Watson stuff, which is obviously terrible in its own realm.
And he also let Baker Mayfield continue to go out there last year when his arm was hanging off of his body. Like, dude, just bench him. You're the coach. You can make that call.
Yeah, but people act like, well, he's a great coach. Why? Because, I mean, like, what? Like, for what reason? Like, why do we really believe this?
I agree. And, like, he's going to have to navigate a very tricky situation this year. Like, here's the thing, and this is the question I'll ask. This could be how we close. When has a team with as many quarterback questions as the Browns have been successful that year? Because don't forget, it's not just, is DeShaun Watson going to be able to play for them this year? Let's say he doesn't get suspended at all. He hasn't played football for a year. He has been away from the game. We don't even know, like, is he going to hit the ground running? Is it going to take him, 2, 3, 4 weeks here to kind of get back in the saddle here and get his legs under him and all that stuff? Like, it's not just a question of, will DeShaun be suspended and what will the length of that suspension be? It'll also be, even if he can play, how is he going to look? Because we don't know.
So obviously there's no situation that is this particularly unique, right? Like, I can't answer this question like, boom, here's the example. And by the way, obviously Stats and I are recording this on Friday, July 1st. It is the Friday before the 4th of July. There is a lot of assumption that maybe some news on DeShaun could come out later today, which would obviously date this conversation, but we're having it at 10 a.m. Central Time, just so everybody's clear. But I would, again, I in no way mean to compare these situations. So, like, just to be explicitly clear about that, I remember vividly thinking, like, how are the Eagles going to go about this in 2016? They had brought Sam Bradford back. They still, because they obviously had traded for him and Teddy Bridgewater and everything. They would go on to trade him because of Teddy Bridgewater, but had acquired him the year before in the trade, incidentally, that involved Nick Foles when they traded with the Rams. They signed Chase Daniel in free agency to large money and then traded up for the 2nd overall pick to draft Carson Wentz. And I remember thinking, like, how is this all going to work? Like, you have these high levels of investment with all 3 of these players. Now, they did obviously cash in on Sam Bradford because the Teddy Bridgewater thing. BLG once wrote a really fantastic, article about how the Teddy Bridgewater injury kind of spawned all these different things. And Chase Daniel ended up backing up Carson Wentz. But they weren't successful in 2016, don't get me wrong, but they weren't the disaster that I thought they were going to be when that situation manifested itself.
I just think we have reached a point with the Browns where, like, we're all kind of assuming that, well, if DeShaun Watson plays, they're going to be good. It's like, well, wait a minute, hold on. They have Amari Cooper there. Who else is DeShaun throwing to?
David Njoku, who they brought back.
David Njoku, Donovan Peoples-Jones, like, it's not exactly, a loaded offense. I know they have Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and that's fine. But again, I wonder with the Browns, like, at some point, doesn't all of this stuff just spell it's not going to work out? Maybe it works out next year if DeShaun can play the whole season. Who knows? But I just can't think of a team that's had this much controversy and questions surrounding the most important position on the field, and it just works out fine. They make the playoffs and everything's good.
To your point, it never does. And again, very different circumstances, and no negative things here, but just again to explore different things that have happened. When the New York Giants drafted Daniel Jones, right? Like every time situations like that happen, the fan base in question tries to talk itself into, no, this will be fine. Like he'll learn it, and like there are examples of that happening, right? Which is like you can find an example to prove everything, right? Like Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, whatever, Phillip Rivers in San Diego. But everybody thought, oh, Daniel Jones will just sit at the foot of Eli Manning and he'll learn, and Eli will be awesome in this final season, and blah 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 blah. And then what happened? Disaster. Not only like on the field, but the PR. Like I actually think we don't give Ben McAdoo the proper credit. He was the only person who had the stones to say, this dude sucks. Like this like Eli's terrible. Like why are we still playing him? Let's play Daniel Jones. Do you remember the outrage that there was when he benched Eli? Was it against the Raiders? And I mean, it was just like a disaster. I think that was the year before actually. But still, like Ben McAdoo was the only person willing to do that. And like those situations never were. It is only awkward. Awkward and drama is all that falls from those.
You're bringing me. I'm not going to ever give Ben McAdoo credit for anything.
I'm just saying he was the only person who was willing to like not let the ghost of Eli Manning overrule every decision that he wanted to make, the way the Maras were when Eli was associated with that organization.
I agree that like I think it was time for Eli to be benched, but didn't he skip over somebody else and he went with Geno Smith?
That's right.
Didn't they have another young quarterback there at the time? It was like, okay, if you're going to bench...
Oh, the Syracuse
Davis Webb, right?
I'm not remembering. I mean, no.
Was it David? I can't remember who it was, but I thought they had a young quarterback there, and it was like, wait, why are you going to Geno if you're going to bench Eli? Shouldn't you go to this other guy? And it just wasn't handled. It wasn't handled well at all. So I'm not giving Ben McAdoo any credit.
I really butchered the year here. It was 2017. That this happened. It was week 13. It was against the Raiders. And to your point, as I look up the 2017 Giants roster, that's the beginning, by the way, of this funk. Maybe they've been cursed. Maybe Ben McAdoo cursed them. But if we look at the 2017 Giants roster, because you're right, it's going to bother me unless I look this up, who the quarterback was.
I think it was Davis Webb. You just get into these weird situations with these like quarterbacks that you think are going to be good, and it just wasn't. Like that was the weird part of it. Like no one criticizes the Colts for getting rid of Peyton Manning because they had Andrew Luck there. Like, okay, you could see the logical transition, but when you're benching the legend of Eli Manning for Geno freaking Smith, that's what people took issue.
That's Seattle Seahawks starting quarterback Geno Smith. Stats. By the way, there's no registered quarterback on that roster except for Geno Smith. So maybe we're both misremembering some of the details here. That's what happens when it's been 5 years. Can you believe it's been 5 years since then? I think about time in the weirdest way. Like, so this is actually my closing thing. This isn't a question. I've said this to you before. But so like it was 10 years ago that the Baltimore Ravens beat your 49ers in the Super Bowl. Like that does not feel like 10 years ago, right? Like that feels like a little bit in the past, but that was, not that long ago. And 10 years ago at that point in time was John Gruden's Buccaneers winning the Super Bowl. But at the time, like if you'd ask me like when did John Gruden's Buccaneers win the Super Bowl, I'd be like, that was like 500 years ago. You know what I mean? Like in 2012, that felt forever ago. But the lights going out in the Superdome to try and help the 49ers because they suck on their own, that was a decade ago.
Feels like yesterday, RJ. Kyle Posey just wrote something for Niners Nation. What is your favorite regular season 49ers game? And I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's up there for me. Colin Kaepernick's first start against the Bears that year when he just destroyed them. And you're like,
dude,
I think oh my God, like, do we have a guy? Like, there is a special feeling. And I know you felt it with Dak, where you're watching your quarterback that your team has drafted and they're lighting it up. And you're like, is this really happening? Like, do we have a guy now? Everyone else is seeing this, right?
Well, and like at the time, and that's what's important. Like it's important context. Like because the Dak thing was so emotionally conflicting. Because like there was also the we have to say goodbye to Tony Romo thing. So it's a different thing. But like the discovery of Romo was very similar because we had been like through the quarterback wilderness for so long. You know what I mean? So it's this like, oh my gosh, did we strike oil type of thing? And at that point, I know Alex Smith had the career resurgence the year prior, but it was still like I'm sure that you felt like it was a bit of a mirage. I know Alex would obviously go on to continue to play well for the Chiefs and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, that's a really special. I remember that night too. Like that was a very, very, very cool night. Just a football. We've talked about this before. The starting quarterback for the Bears that night is a really great piece of trivia.
Jason Campbell.
Yeah, I think people forget that happened. Like that, and
he got murdered in the game. I think he got.
That's another
like
team we didn't talk about that imports quarterbacks like nobody's business. Like that's just really, really wild. But that was such a seminal year in the NFL. Like that was the first year the Nike contract, sponsoring the uniforms and whatnot. Like that was a really, really fun time. That 2012 Niners team just wasn't good enough. Ran into a buzzsaw that was Joe Flacco.
I saw something just to close out because you mentioned the Bears. It is absurd how some teams just cannot find quarterbacks. I read this. This was on ProFootballTalk.com. Shereen Williams, who we love on this show. Since the All-Star Game was created in its present form in 1951, so AKA the Pro Bowl, the Bears have only had 5 Pro Bowl quarterbacks. Everybody makes the Pro Bowl. The Bears have had 5 since 1951.
The Pro Bowl used to be legit. Like, don't act like it's always been this like joke. You know what I mean? It used to be a point of honor. But yeah, I mean, it's Jay Cutler is one. I think that's somebody like back to the like or the ratio of like trust to earned trust or whatever. I think the ratio of flack to career performance is so disproportionate for Jay Cutler's time in Chicago. Like I know that who he was off the field generated a lot of discourse, but he was highly productive for them. I think that he gave them a chance. Like, he truly did. I mean, he gave them a chance. He got hurt in the NFC Championship game, and that was unfortunate. But I mean, he gave them a chance. I think that people can those days, like thinking back to that time, like Jay Cutler and Brandon Marshall in Chicago, that was a really fun time.
Brandon Marshall I remember seeing him in person at the Super Bowl. And when you see how big Brandon Marshall is and how long his arms are, I just remember thinking, how did anybody ever stop this man from catching any football he ever wanted to catch? Like, it's just, you don't realize how big and long and strong these people are. And that was Brandon Marshall. But I agree. You can say, in all honesty, Jay Cutler is one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the Chicago Bears. And it's not even really that close.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember when Brandon Marshall got traded to the Dolphins. That was a big deal. Like, we need to do an episode stats that's like things we forgot that happened. Like, Brandon Marshall was on the Dolphins. Like, that feels
But
really
when you
wild.
said Tyrann Mathieu was in Houston, I was like, oh my God, that was completely erased from my mind. So
yeah.
Good job by you. All right. That is our answering big NFL questions with big NFL questions episode. If you think we left one off.
What's your favorite 4th of July movie?
I said The Sandlot right when we did the show.
You can't say that. I set you up for that. You can't take that low-hanging fruit.
I'm taking it.
Wow. Actually, let me rephrase. What's your favorite 4th of July dish before we leave, Stats? Something you like, and maybe you don't eat it every 4th of July, but something maybe you just think of when you think of 4th of July. If you say hot dogs, I'm leaving.
Green bean salad.
Those are the worst words you've ever said to me in our entire friendship. I'm so disgusted by that. Oh my gosh. Wow.
There you go. Enjoy your 4th of July, everybody. Have a happy, safe holiday. Don't do anything crazy. All right. If you want to enjoy an adult beverage or 3 or 4, that's fine. Just stay home. We'll talk to you next week.
Astros won the World Series.